Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Can we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All righty. Okay. Looks like we have pretty much everyone. So Happy New Year, everyone, for those of you who have not seen yet. I hope everyone had a good holiday. And as we discussed at our last meeting before the holiday break, we are looking to try to get some consensus on these items that we've been working on for how long now, Jared?
Months.
Which, 6 or 8?
When did we
6,
start?
7
Yeah.
months. So what we did, I'm going to hand it over to Jared, but what we've been doing in the interim is trying to slot some of these items in what we felt like was an easy to, instead of having us just doing it all on our own, in a way that we could sort of have some kind of blueprint and draft to work off of, and then have the discussions based on that. And then we took some of the major items, some of the big items that we don't have a lot of information on. You'll notice they're not page numbered, but we had put together a list of items that we are still in discussion about and don't have a whole lot of, we don't have firm estimates on, and we have don't have a real plan, so to speak, yet, but wanted to make sure that all town bodies in the community were aware of these items. And so we just have them there, as we discussed it's during some of our meetings. So do you want me to hand it off to you now, Jared?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, right. And so just to follow up on what Brenda was saying, we had some large dollar amounts, especially in the WPCA capital plan, and to a lesser extent on the town side. And so rather than coming into this meeting and working off of the I'll say the old plan, the most recent version, and trying to adjust things, push things out, this got bumped, and so now we got, that would have been a real, would have taken hours and hours. And so we internally, we went through and made those changes that we thought would work, prioritizing the projects based on what WPCA's input, working with Joe DeVonzo and John Bodie, and on the town side, working with department heads to figure out how things should be prioritized. I wanted to make sure that in the process that everybody knows what was, what was changed, so there is a way of tracking that, so you can see what was pushed off or what may have gotten kind of put to the side, and so we can go through that as well. But what you have before you, I'll just kind of give an overview of what the documents are before you. There's a summary document that has all the 3 entities and the total dollar amount, which is really the summary of the capital plan. We have the town side projects, the details of each of the projects on the town side over the, it's technically 6 years, starting in 23 with the current year, and then, which I refer to as year 0, and then 1 through 5, starting in 24. The document that Brenda was just talking about is Exhibit 3, where we took some of the projects that need to be developed a little bit more and kind of put those off to the side for now. And then we have some of the other projects that were, most of them were already in year 6 through 10. Those are noted in here, and then there were some other ones that weren't in 6 through 10 but got pushed out, so you'll see those in this list in Exhibit 4. Exhibit 5 is the same type of document for the WPCA, all of their projects. We added a notation if a certain project is, because there's a lot of them in WPCA where they span multiple years. And so we noted the total amount of the project and then the projected cash flow for each of the years. And then also there was a document that showed the out years for WPCA as well, which is Exhibit 6. And you'll notice that there's one very large item there. So maybe I'll just go through each one of these, some of them quicker than others. We've had the 14 points presentations for each of the projects for 24. So I don't know that we need to go into a lot of detail on the projects, but we can kick it right off and start with Exhibit 1. And so, sticking with the the framework that we've been working off of and what we need to, trying to keep our debt service around 8.5%. So, depending on the years and what interest rate assumptions you're making, we're probably in the like 30 to $37.5 million a year that we could issue bonds for. And so, if you go to the very bottom number of this page, that gives you the grand total of both all Board of Ed, town, and the WPCF. And so I think it's pretty self-explanatory, and then we can start looking at some of the details of what these numbers are made up of.
Jared, can I just ask you one question?
Sure.
So for fiscal year 2023, is that what's left for the remainder of this year? That would be available for this year?
That's the total amount for this year.
Okay, so that's what's been approved already,
Yeah.
not, okay, got it.
Yep. All right, so if we go to Exhibit 2, I'll note a couple of things on here. Starting in 2024, there were a couple of additions. After we went through and backed out a couple of the larger town projects, major upgrades and renovations, we added the Tungus Hill, so this would be in capital non-recurring in 24, so it's actually on page 2 of Exhibit 2, right at the top. We added under Park and Rec a dog park with a location to be determined. But we've, gotten, Brenda could probably speak more to this, but we've gotten has been a lot of interest in this, and so we wanted to make sure that that was in there, and, the location will be discussed. And so, Tungus Hill, right above it, the pickleball court replacement, that was already in here. You guys had the 14 points on that. The only difference is that there's also been a lot of interest in more pickleball courts, so we added 2 more courts at that location at Tungus Hill, and that was a suggestion from Anthony.
So just to follow up on those, that's been something, aside from Anthony's master plan that they had the consultant, which will be presented tonight to the town bodies, these items have been extraordinarily popular with our community. A dog park has been talked about for at least the last 20 years in town, even if not longer. And it's been a discussion, an ongoing discussion in looking at Anthony's master plan, which we went over pretty extensively. Dog parks were determined to could be potentially located at 2 different locations in town. So I thought it would be nice to have that money slotted in there and then be able to have that discussion with the town bodies, obviously with the Park and Rec. And let's face it, it's no matter where we can put a dog park, it'll probably be somewhat controversial. So I don't know that that'll exactly happen in that year, but I thought it would be at least something responding to our citizens who have been overwhelmingly in support of having one. And the other, obviously, is the pickleball courts. And I don't know if members of our workshop have attended or did attend some of those meetings that Anthony held with the consultant, doing the master plan surveys with the community and residents and elected officials. Pickleball was probably one of the most popular items that was identified during that process. A lot of our residents play pickleball and are very passionate about it. I get at least a couple emails a week about pickleball. And we do have some pickleball courts that are down. Obviously, those are the ones at Tungus Hill that they're going to be repaired. But Anthony figured we had the space, and why not add to give that additional amenity to our community who is really enjoying that recreational activity.
A couple other things that in this exhibit that did change. I moved up. We moved up in FY27. Again, talking to Anthony about it. At the bottom of page 3 of 4 here, Park and Rec Jennings master plan upgrade. We had spread that out over 3 years. We just moved it, the full amount, the $3.9 million, into 2027. And then the same thing with Doug Yellow on the next page for FY28. That was also spread out and was happening mostly in years 6 through 10. That got bumped up as well. And it's so all to happen in FY28.
Jared, it's Mark. Before you go on to these next pages, could you tell us what you took out of 2024?
Yeah.
Because the original, looking at one of the original sheets, it called for 30,778,751, and you are now at grand total 32,267,151. So what was taken out and what was added? You said added was there's 2 pickleball courts and the dog park, right?
So if you want to, I was just going through that first exhibit, and then you'll see what was taken out in these next documents. I just wanted to cover what was added.
Exhibit 3 is what's taken out from
that's part of it, and then there's some in Exhibit 4 as well. So we can go through those as well. I wanted to highlight for you what was added in Exhibit 2, and then we could move on to what got taken out. And so I think that was it for additions. Yeah, I think that was it for the additions, so we can actually, go ahead, you have a question?
There was, sorry. I think the, oh, God.
Not on, Jen.
Oh. At our house, we have to hold the button.
Hold it down. You don't have to do it here.
There was a substantial amount added to the Penfield project, too, in '24, right? Was that a change
So-
that I noted? It wasn't new, but there was a changed amount, right?
Yeah, so that was just, I changed the allocation between the 2 years, and I changed the notation, so that it had been separated between construction and remediation. I just lumped the two together.
Okay.
And then I changed the allocation between the 2 years. That's still a discussion, so it's not a final number, and the allocation may change in the future, just like pretty much anything else in the plan. But that's our best guess at this point.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Oh,
Go ahead, Lori.
Lori?
So, Jared, I just wanted to clarify, this is still not on a cash flow basis, right? The Board of Ed gave us the 2 scenarios, or the the reconciliation, we had the projects in the year that they were going to be asked for approval, but then when the money was going to be spent, are we eventually going to get that for this? Because we are trying to tie into debt service, so don't we need the true cash flow timing on these projects?
For the town,
For both.
that's what this is. That's what this is for Board of Education and for town. If we were to do this on a request basis, you would see the Board of Ed in, I forget if it's 24, 25, you'd see like a $26 million request or something like that. This is again, best guess about what the cash flow would be.
So this means then in fiscal '24, the fiscal '24 numbers, if this is on a cash flow basis, you're going to be asking for approval of these items this spring and bonding for these in July so that the money can be spent next year?
At this point, yes, but we'll, before we bond, we'll go back to the departments and say, hey, where are you now? Has anything changed? And we'll update the number.
Okay, so, but my point is, so there's a high degree of certainty around these fiscal '24 numbers, because this is not, if we're going to spend this money in fiscal '24, this is the stuff you're going to be asking for approval for shortly. I just wanted to
That's
be clear
correct.
on that.
Yes, anything in '24 is the stuff that we plan to ask for at some point. So I think the non-recurring I imagine that we'll do as a group sometime in February or probably in February. And then the other ones will go as they become ready. You voted on.
Yeah, I guess that's my point of confusion. If they're going as they become ready during fiscal '24, they're not going to be part of the fiscal '24 bonding, right? So that's why what I was trying to understand is if we're trying to get to the debt service numbers, then, if we're not going to ask for approval for this fiscal '24 stuff this spring, it's really not fiscal '24 cash flow from a debt perspective, right?
Our plan is to ask for this stuff in the spring of '24.
Okay, so all of the fiscal '24 items.
That's the plan.
Jared, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Sorry, could you just clarify the reimbursement column here on Exhibit 2?
Sure. The reimbursement, there could be a number of things that fall into that. It could be that we have a grant. So in some of the cases, actually the highlighted ones are where we have ARPA money, where we're getting ARPA money. It could be, and we'll get to some of these in WPCF, it could be that it's coming out of their fund balance. In some cases, we'll have money for, in particular, later on, you'll see for roadway capital improvement, money for that in the reimbursement column because it's coming out of the operating budget.
I guess the ones that stood out to me were like Penfield, the fire stations, like where's that?
Okay, so
reimbursement coming?
those are actually surplus dollars that we've identified surplus money that would be used for those.
So that's not a true reimbursement.
Yeah,
it's an offset.
Right.
Okay, that's why I
There's
was
a lot
confused.
of so there are a lot of different things going on. That's the moniker that we've given to that column.
I just get confused because with Board of Ed, we have like state reimbursement from the Office of School Construction. And so when I hear reimbursement, I'm thinking like a percentage, or with Penfield, like FEMA, which we know is different. But
Right.
that's why I was a little confused there. So I think that, I just bring that out because that just might cause some confusion in the public too. So I throw it out there
Like
for
labeling what it is.
Yeah.
Yep. It's hard to come up with one. Maybe offset's the word. Yeah, maybe that's the word. Because like I said, there are a lot of different things that could, and I can make a note of that
Good, right?
too.
Money we're not paying.
Yeah.
That's it. Not coming out of our pocket.
Hey, Jared, it's Ken. Just a couple of clarification questions, and just to follow on about the reimbursement. So if I looking on Exhibit 2, and I'm looking at fiscal year '24, your total cost is 3.2 million. So just from a procedural standpoint, because I want to make sure that I understand this. So that's actually the amount that the town bonds, and then as you get any offsets, reimbursements, do you just apply that to retire the bonds, or what's the actual amount that you?
Tell me again what year you're looking at?
If you look on Exhibit 2,
Yep,
and you look at your grand totals for fiscal year '24
yep.
on page 2, so you've got your total cost at 3.2 million. Then you've got
32 million.
32 million, sorry.
Yep.
Sorry, 32 million. And then you've got your reimbursement offset amounts, 22 million one, and then your net is 10 million. Does the town bond the entire 32 million, and then you just retire it as you get those offsets or whatever reimbursements? Or are you only bonding the net amount?
The net amount.
The net amount, okay. And just one other question. If I look at Exhibit 1 and compare it to Exhibit 2, I notice that the grand totals are just somewhat different than your total cash flow. Should those numbers be the same, or am I missing something? And they're usually off by about $1 million or
So
so.
grand total, let's see.
So if you look at fiscal '24, your total cash flow is 31.2 million, but your total cost on Exhibit 2 is 32.2 million.
Okay. Yeah, let me, I'll have to go back and look at that.
Okay.
That formula, it's probably, go ahead, Caitlin.
Exhibit 2 is only the town, correct? If you're looking at the grand total, that's the Board of Ed, town, and WPCF. So if you look at that 10,080,080 under the town.
Oh, okay,
one,
yep.
That corresponds to the 10,080 in the third column for.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay, great.
Excuse me, if
Sorry.
you're gonna speak, you gotta
I'm not gonna
sit
speak
at the
anymore,
end
I'm
of
not
the
gonna
table.
speak anymore, Jerry, that's it, that's.
You want to hear.
All right.
Gotta
that
give her
help, Ken?
Portable.
Thanks, Caitlin.
So just, Jared, one quick question. I think I asked this before, but I don't remember where it ended up. On DPW capital equipment for fiscal '24, so 2 years ago, we approved 3 years' worth of capital equipment for DPW, if you recall. So we approved an amount that was supposed to cover 3 years' worth of purchases, and, those would be done over time, but we approved that all up front. So why, I don't remember why we have another capital equipment purchase here 2 years into the 3-year period.
So if the timing of it was, and I think sometimes DPW, when they're thinking about these things, think about it in calendar terms, calendar years. Some of those were purchased in '21, '22, and '23, and so those are their 3 years. So we would have a half of a year that would need to be captured in '24.
So this is a half a year's of equipment, and
As far as we know right now, that's the projection right now.
okay.
And if that's it on that exhibit, then we can go to Exhibit 3. So these were projects that were put off to the side, as Brenda noted, for a lot of these relate to different town properties, buildings on town properties, and we're continuing to do work to develop the scope of the project, the location of the project, how much it's going to cost. And so the idea would be that as these things get developed and this picture becomes clearer, that and we feel like we have a number that we can rely on in a project that we can rely on, then we can slot it into the plan. But right now, we're still working on these two to prioritize them and also to, get more details about each one of them.
On Exhibit 3, the turf field, that's from the December version. Is that the one that's from Sullivan?
Well, it's an additional turf field. So I know,
The Sullivan came off this.
yeah, I took that off because they want another turf field. So I know their discussions have been another turf field, adding an additional turf field on top of the one we already approved. So I thought it would be best to just list turf field, because who knows what location it will end up be at, and we're still working on this public-private partnership. My understanding is that the Athletic Foundation formed a 501c3 recently, but we haven't had them in to have any meetings to hear about where they are with fundraising and things of that nature, so it's just there sort of as a placeholder.
Okay, and some of our older facilities, Town Hall, Old Town Hall, Senior Center, that have kind of come off the list, appreciate, what is on the list. You don't have any concerns about some of our older properties that are on this list in terms of them not having a place right now?
Well, the problem, with the senior center, for example.
Senior center,
That
yeah.
was something I had thrown out, I think it was my first year during the capital planning workshop, that I thought we should set aside 20 million, for a new senior center. And everybody's eyes popped out of their head, and they were all like, what are you talking about? Because I knew we need to do something, renovations, but as you know, it's in a floodplain. We can't do massive renovations. We did a certain amount of money there for upgrades to their HVAC, the bathrooms, specific things. But we're always kind of up against that rule there about what we can and cannot do with the senior center. But, as sort of a, maybe someday, we could build a brand-new senior center. I think it's something to keep in mind. Some of the other ones, the old town hall's not on here. I've discussed this probably a lot during town meetings. It's a very complicated building. It has a lot of issues because of its historic nature. That's why we had put in the renovation or add on to this building. This has been something I've talked about since we came in, and we had looked at to have all of our town departments at one building so that people obviously knew where it was, because we get people floating around in here all the time looking for the town clerk's office, and then they have people over there looking for offices over here. And the building would be a lot easier to renovate, so to speak, with preservation grants that Michael Jaley shared, that there's a lot of preservation grant money available through the state. But how do I explain this? The way it's been explained to me is it's because it's an historic building, it would require a whole lot of additional money if we were to continue to use it as a municipal building, as opposed to a building where maybe we had a meeting space where Board of Ed could use, or RTM could use, or maybe could have little events there and things of that nature, and still maintain the historical quality of the building, but not necessarily use it for a municipal office building. So we don't know what really, where we're going to go with that. So that's why it's there too.
And just one last question, and I'll move on. I know everybody has a lot of questions. Is there anything going on with Giant Steps? I know it was on there before as a new project, but now it's off with question marks. And is there any thinking around from the town side for Giant Steps?
Yeah, so we've been approached by several different entities with ideas about it, that we thought some of them were pretty good. And then they fell through. So where they would come in, pay the town money, utilize that space, but they didn't pan out. So we're sort of just in a waiting, sort of a holding period. I'd like to put some soccer fields up there, or some kind of fields, one at least, something. But we do have additional space, and I'm not really sure yet.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, before you guys ask more questions, I just want to clarify something on here. Some of where I mark them new, you guys and this group have seen these in the past, and they've been in the plan in the past, over the past few months. I'm kind of thinking ahead to what's going to be presented to the Board of Finance and others. So if it says new, you may have seen it, but the Board of Finance hasn't seen it yet. And so that's why it's labeled that way.
Or other town bodies.
Yeah, yes.
Jared, just to that point, so as we move this forward, so if these numbers are going to go forward, I know they're just kind of like pie in the sky placeholders, but we should really make sure that we're clear that we look at some of these things because, for example, Fire Station 4 and Jackman Avenue, I would fully support those projects down the road, of course, as a taxpayer and citizen, but those numbers just seem low to me.
Well, we need to do a full analysis of all of that. There needs to be a complete analysis of our fire stations, where is the best location, how many do we need, that kind of thing.
Okay, so these numbers are not being presented
No,
in a way
no.
that's
They're just things that have been brought up by departments or various conversations. We just didn't want to leave anything out, so the people just had a sense that they were there and not shocked when things potentially come up in the future.
Yeah, and these were the numbers that were on the previous plan, so I just kind of rolled them.
Go ahead, Mark. Mark?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm here. Sorry. Thank you. Just to be clear, I didn't have time to go over all this today because I was working and we didn't get it till later in the day. So I just wanted to clarify for FY24, Exhibit 2, starting with FY24. I think, unless I didn't hear it, you missed the Lower Wharf Fishing Pier was out.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I did miss
Is that
that.
due to the damage that just occurred? Is it in the
Exactly.
reimbursement? Is that insurance or what is that there?
Well, we actually, believe it or not, we were putting that in there before the damage. The Harbor Commission had come and met with us, myself and a few others of us, Bucky Marsilio and some others, to talk about the fact that it was extraordinarily old and falling apart and it was becoming a safety hazard, and they were pursuing a grant, and they had discussed a grant opportunity that was available that they pretty much were told they would have a very high probability of receiving. And so we had that discussion, and they had asked us to, should we be cornering it off, like putting out a caution tape and stop allowing people to even go on it because of the instability of it. And then, of course, nature took care of that, literally within
Yeah.
less than a week.
Yeah, because they presented to us at our last RTM meeting.
Yeah.
And I don't think at the time the grant, the grant hasn't been approved yet, right?
No, but they've been in discussions with their person that they deal with frequently, and there is grant funding available, and they thought that this was something that was going to fit perfectly.
All right, and the Sergeant Murphy Playground, 150,000. I don't think you mentioned that one.
Yeah, that was
And then-
moved up from,
Yeah. So that's moved
Later
up.
year.
And then basically you moved up Penfield construction remediation, 4 million to 8 million.
Yeah,
So you basically, so that's where the difference is, or majority of the difference is there. You took out the turf field, which was 4.3 million. I'm just trying to understand,
yeah.
So I think,
the moving around here, what was added and what was taken out for this year in particular, because it's the first one, but.
right, what we were trying to do, Mark, like I mentioned at the beginning, was we, in our internal meetings, were trying to make this an easier to understand and work sort of document, and having sort of a turf field in there that we really don't have any idea, where, we don't know how much money the organization has raised, and all this other stuff. And same thing with,
I'm not questioning.
right,
I'm not questioning that at all.
Right.
I personally would have taken it out when we started this whole thing, because there's a
So-
lot more to
right.
this than just saying we want a turf field, right?
Yeah, we just wanted to move things around in a more realistic approach, because our numbers, if you remember, in those last documents, were exceeding our bonding cap, and we didn't want to have things in there that we weren't, like, say, for example, shovel-ready on. And then when we pulled out those non-shovel-ready items, then it was kind of low. So we're like, oh, well, let's put the playground up, because now we have some room here, and that'll be a nice addition to that neighborhood, and it's not for a huge amount, things like that. So we just did some shuffling of the deck that we thought would be helpful for our workshop to review and take a look at.
Yeah, no, I have no problem with that. I'm just trying to figure out in my head what's been put where and what's fallen off and what's been added and what's been increased, let's say.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jared, can I ask a couple of questions here? And I just want to go back to Exhibit 3 for a second. And maybe actually this first question is for you, Brenda. The old town hall, do we have some sort of an obligation to maintain it in perpetuity as a historic building, I'm assuming?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's an important part of our town's history.
Yeah, okay, I just wanted to make sure I
Obviously,
understand
it's a
that.
beautiful old building. It's a building that, is tied to our roots, and I think people in this town would be pretty upset if we knocked it down or something.
Right, no, but so one way or the other, we have a responsibility to maintain the building.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
I feel responsible for maintaining it.
Yeah, okay. And just to go back to Exhibit 3 for a second. So Jared, these are projects that have basically been removed from the master list because at this point, we don't have enough information and detail to really move forward in any kind of a solid fashion. If that detail does come in at some point, is there room left in the budget to incorporate some of this stuff?
Well, I would jump in and say that, as we said all along, right? What my vision is for us to firm up our consensus, because this body doesn't vote, but to firm up our consensus around this year's that we're going to vote for 24 list, non-reoccurring in capital, and then have a fairly, good draft for the 5-year capital plan. But like I said in the beginning, right, and throughout this process, that deck will get shuffled
Right,
as time
okay.
moves on. So, for example, if we get something in, or if there's something happens, or if we get more good information and we feel that that's really important at that time, any of these items, or again, emergencies that come up that may not be on the list.
Okay. So you've built in flexibility to your master list here?
But the capital plan is a living document.
Okay.
It's not set in stone.
Got it, okay.
Is there any other questions on this or anything else? Any input? Anything you like? Anything you want to move around?
We can go to Exhibit 4. Go to Exhibit 4, and that's the list of projects that either were already in years 6 through 10 or got pushed to years 6 through 10. The biggest one, which was multiple years, is the South, in terms of the dollar amount, is the South Benson project. We discovered, in talking to Bill Hurley, that we had slotted a healthy grant reimbursement there, and that was not, at least under the grant that we were looking for at the time, that it's not eligible. And so we'll obviously continue to look at this and see if there's another way, another program that we could get reimbursement, grant money, but for now, it's been pushed out into future years.
Jerry, are we going to talk some more about WPCA or?
Yep. Yeah, we can do that now. Unless anybody has any questions on that, getting through Exhibit 4, that covers the town side. So if you want to move on to WPCA.
Yeah, Jared, just to back up for 1 second to Exhibit 4 here, regarding the South Benson stuff, and is the reason we're kind of pushing it back is simply, is because of the large expenditures involved here? Is that, I mean, is that basically the reason?
That's I would say that's the main reason, yeah, yeah.
Are any of these things, and maybe, you know, Bill Hurley might be the more important person to ask on this, but are any of these, you know, critical projects where there's risk to the town in pushing them off?
We could talk to Bill, but if he thought this was really critical, then he would have said something.
Okay.
He would have said that we, you know, grant or no grant, we need to move forward with this.
Okay.
No, I think it just sits there, because I don't think anybody knows how to undo it.
All right. All right, so if there's no other questions there, we can move on to WPCA, starting in Exhibit 5. So in the last few weeks, we've had many conversations with WPCA, with John Bodie and Joe DeVanzo. We also received updated information from a consultant on all the pump stations and the cost of those. So you would see if you were to look at these numbers compared to previous numbers, they've all changed. And so working with WPCA, they went through and prioritized their projects, and so we changed them around, shifted more of them to the years 6 through 10. I took there's still a big question mark on what happens with the facility, whether or not when it's going to need to be done. So that has been moved into the year 6 through 10, and that's obviously a huge one. And we had the consultant do was just to kind of apply what they thought was inflationary factor to the original analysis that was done for the upgrade to the facility. And so given that that analysis had been done and that proposal had been done years ago, they just kind of took that overall number and applied an inflationary factor, and that's where this new number comes from. And so, the overall number has been, we knew it was going to be tens of millions of dollars. By the time we get to doing anything on it, it's realistically probably going to be $120 million or more.
And what did we have that on the books at before?
Before this, we had it on at, so in the last plan from last year, I believe the net amount that we had it for was about $50 million, because the amount that they had it at was, I want to say 68, was what the analysis showed. And then obviously there was going to be some clean water funding that was factored into that. So that got us to a net of around $50 million.
And now the number's $120 million?
Net.
And now the number's $120 million?
Jim, I don't think it's on.
Oh.
You have to hit the button at the top.
One more time.
So now the number's $120 million, not 50?
The gross number, well, the better comparison would be to 68, but yeah, because the gross number would be about 120, assuming, so the 68 million was years ago in those years dollars, and there has been, obviously been inflation from now till then, and then if you tack onto that inflation between now and 5 years from now, when work will be done, then there's, that's about 10 years worth of inflation on there.
And that 10 years of inflation raises it by how much? So it's got to be from
So it's
maybe
almost-
$70, $50 million worth of inflation.
It's
That
almost
seems
double.
hard to believe.
There.
That seems hard to believe.
So what we took was we used the inflationary factor that the consultant gave us for the pump stations, and we applied that going forward.
But the inflationary factor that was not on it up until that point had to have been lower, right? Because inflation was like 2% for a while.
Yeah.
So the first amount of inflation is at 2% a year in actual numbers, actually. I mean, we could figure it out. There were some years it was below 2%. It was like 1.5 or 1.
Is this for WPCA?
This is for WPC.
And we had a consultant look at this?
We had a consultant to give it a rough estimate based on inflation since that project was analyzed, and also going forward what they think inflation's going to be on these kinds of projects.
And this was analyzed 10 years ago?
No, it was 2018, I think, when I think it was 2018 when the analysis was done.
Who did it? Was it the same people who did?
Same people, yeah.
Yeah?
Yep, same group, yep. And so if you look at more recent versions, I believe the number that we were carrying as of a few weeks ago was about 98 million, not the 68 million.
Where is this? Where are we looking?
It's exhibit.
Do they have some
6.
type of analysis done in writing where they go through this on how we get to the 120? Or are you dealing with
No.
them on a telephone call and just some rough numbers?
It's a rough number.
And we need to start getting, these numbers are getting so huge, we actually probably either need to have a Board of Finance meeting where we start getting these people in here to talk about it, because I don't even feel confident based on this telephone call that it's really 120 million. It could be 150 or 180 million, or it could be less than
It
that.
was a telephone call. It
Okay.
was a
All right,
calculation
hold on a minute. Is
that
this
they
through
did.
fiscal year 29 through 33? You have here? Fiscal year?
Yes.
29 through 33.
Right.
So the WPCA is the one who goes through all this. This is their responsibility, correct?
That was their responsibility. I used the inflation that the consultant gave us that got applied to it. So their estimate that they gave based on applying inflation between the time the analysis was done and now was about $98 million.
Yeah.
That it would be in today's dollars if
remember
it
that.
started today.
I mean, I remember years ago, when Tom Flynn was on the Board of Finance, he kept saying that he thought that number, I think, was being estimated something in the 70. He thought it was going to be more like 90-something.
Right, so it's about $98 million
Yeah.
in today's dollars. If the plan is to not do this for 5 more years and start it in '29, then there's going to be that much more inflation on it.
I mean, listen, we've always known that we know the WPCF had massive amounts of projects sitting there for a very long time, not being touched. And it's frightening. I mean, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money.
Jim, to your question, it would be, to do, I'm not sure we're at a point now, and the point of being committed to have them do another complete analysis to get a better,
Well, we're not there.
to get that right. We're not there right now, because we're talking about, thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that analysis.
Okay.
And so we had them do an estimate based on what inflation has been and what they projected.
We should probably put an asterisk next to $120 million from now on and just say that number could vary drastically, because we really have no idea.
I would say
What
that,
this is
I would
gonna
say
cost.
for all these.
I mean, listen,
probably
this
do that
is
for all these.
past our 5-year, right? I mean, it starts.
No,
at
I
29.
understand, but
I mean, I think obviously whoever's here and doing this work in that time period is, obviously toward the end of the 5, you're going to have to start really looking hard at these numbers and whatever projects will be then queued up at the time.
Yeah.
WPCA, whoever's going to be on that in 29 to 33 and so on and so forth. I mean, it's eye-opening just to look at, I think it's a good lesson for us to know that we have some massive things coming down the pike, and like to your point, Jim, you always say, after, 10 years, you know.
No,
far down the
I understand, but it's just, I think, a bunch of us on, at least the Board of Finance, we're seeing like $70 million.
Yeah. And even
And
Pecan
now,
was saying
recently, now it's
he didn't think
98.
that number was
And then
good.
98's gotten to 120, and, by the time that comes, it'll probably be 250. I mean, it will be $250 million.
Not good.
So
I mean,
it's
listen,
just-
we could,
it's just-
we could wipe away the whole 5-year capital plan and just go dig in
Yeah.
now and fix it. I mean,
Numbers are huge. Okay.
everything else on the back burner, but
Yeah, this is Ken, so just a comment on that, though. Jim, I completely agree with what you're saying. I mean, the numbers are all over the place, and they're likely to continue to be all over the place, but I think Brenda and Jared, what you guys are doing here is useful, and this is where I really think the value of this comes into play, is because you're estimating as best as you can based on the information that you have today.
Yeah.
But you're also putting the town in a position where it can begin to prepare for these type of expenses that we know are coming down the road in 5 to 10 years, rather than, 6 or 7 years from now, everybody gets a big surprise, oh, hey, the sewer system just collapsed and, we got to spend $150 million to fix it. So that's where I see the value in this, is making sure everybody understands what's coming down, not just in the next 5 years, but in potentially the 5 years after that. So planning can be done accordingly.
no, thank you, Ken. And that is the whole point of the workshop, is that we do that. And I remember, and we had quite a few meetings over the last couple of years, but, Bucky Marsilio had asked WPCA, and we had brought their chairman in, was it a year ago or more, Jared, to talk about the I&I, looking at the I&I. And we had put together they're testing our I&I, because that price could be less. It's based on how much our wastewater treatment facility is actually filtering waste, and how much is it cracks of water. And we were coming up with really hasn't been fully reviewed. So I think that analysis, when it comes back, will be extraordinarily helpful to better understanding what that number's going to be. Because based on those conversations and those meetings, and, it was a while ago now, but they kept saying this number could go down significantly if we fix some of these I&I issues. So, we'll see.
Can I
So,
ask a question?
sure.
I do want to comment on that 120 million, but moving back to fiscal 24, which is obviously right in front of us, the East Trunk Wetland Replacement Project, 6.25 million total project. I'm trying to understand these numbers. So if the total project is 6.25 million, that's the item that came before the Board of Finance for approval last month, and we delayed it. But now for fiscal 24, we're showing a cost of 31.25 and a reimbursement of 21.25. So where are those numbers coming from, and where is the rest of the 62.50?
So if you go into, the first part of it is in 23. So the first phase of it would be in 23. And then
But then
the,
again, this is supposed to be cash flow, right? We're not going to have this cash flow. We're not going to have cash flow of 3.2 million in 23. I mean, we haven't even approved this yet.
so it may change.
So okay, and this is where and not to harp on it, but if we're trying to get to our debt service numbers, I feel like we've got to move these things around to be aligned to how it's going to align with our debt service. So that project, even if it does get approved, I don't know how much progress we make on it in fiscal 23, but it certainly wouldn't be bonded in fiscal 23. So it would be part of our fiscal 24 bonding, it seems like. So, I might move that to fiscal 24. And I guess on the reimbursement, we've got reimbursement of 2125 on each of the numbers. So this is saying basically we're going to have $4,250,000 of reimbursement on that project. And that I guess that's news to me. I didn't realize that.
That's the, no, that's the amount. That's the amount that went through the, that you guys looked at but did not approve, because there's a portion of it that's related to the WPCA fund balance. There's the portion that was the grant from the state. So those are both in
We had
there.
a $750,000 grant, but so if you take out the 750, that leaves whatever, $3.5 million. And I just don't remember, maybe this is new, maybe this is their new
Nope.
proposal, but is the proposal then to take $3.5 million out of their fund balance for that project?
That's what was in the proposal.
Okay. So, and that's, that's, I guess, part of the overall plan we're going to discuss for the WPCA on the 31st. But I know that everyone was asking about, what does that do to fund balance? How does that get replenished, et cetera? I would just suggest, though, that we should be moving that item to fiscal 24 to put it on a cash flow basis. And then,
Like all the rest of these, as we get closer to that time where we're issuing bonds, we'll
but Jared, we've
get
already
another.
bonded for fiscal, we're in fiscal 23. We've already done our bonding for fiscal 23. So if we approve this, it's going to be a fiscal 24 bond, right?
It'll definitely be it'll be a 2023 calendar year bond issuance. But some of the money,
based on a budget,
the question,
right, June
the
30th.
question is
So-
about cash flow, and there is a chance that we may spend some cash. And if it changes, and we'll update it.
Okay, I won't harp on it. I mean, we can discuss further offline, but I think we've got to get on an apples and apples basis with the debt service schedule, because that's what all of this is based on, the 8.5%. And the other question I have is, from our understanding and talking to just a very brief conversations, we understood that that project was going to be phase 1, and then the $10 million project was going to be phase 2. But we haven't even approved or started phase 1, and yet we've got the phase 2 piece beginning fiscal 24. So again, that may be when approval is asked for, but I think on a cash flow basis, that needs to be shifted forward a year too, because I think that first project, I recall them saying that was a 13 to 15 month endeavor. So it doesn't seem like we'd be in a position to do the phase 2 in fiscal, certainly not finance it in fiscal 24. So I just have those two comments. I feel like those two probably need to be shifted.
Which
forward.
items, Lori, again?
The East Trunk, so the East Trunk wetland replacement, the $6.2 million project, and then the phase 2 of that, which is the $10 million project that we've got, that we just got that grant on.
Yes.
Yeah.
And-
So I have those two comments. And then with regard to the issue Jim brought up on the $120 million, and I appreciate everyone, and Ken's comments as well, in terms of having these on the list so that we can raise visibility on them. But my thought is that, if we're going to be facing this, we need to do more than just raise visibility. So for Penfield and the fill pile, for example, one of the things we've done, knowing that we had this big liability looming, is we've been systematically putting away money and setting it aside so that that obligation can be met without a big hit in any given year. And we're never going to be in a position where, we can digest large amounts like this over a year or two. So in terms of, thinking about this from a long-term planning perspective, it seems to me that if this is, 5 years out, 6 years out, 7 years out, we have an opportunity to start planning for it in terms of thinking about doing something similar that we did for Penfield, which is, perhaps putting money aside. Because otherwise, I don't know how you ever get to a point where you're going to be able to absorb a project of that size. We never will. So that's, I don't know if anybody's given any thought to that. And, I'm not suggesting this year is the year, but it's part of putting together a long-term plan. I think there should be, maybe some conceptual ideas around how we plan to address the financing of these things, because we're going to need 5 or 6 or 7 years to put money aside if that's what we decide to do. So I'll just throw that out there, and I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on that.
Lori, it's Ken. I would just say that I agree with what you said, because that's my whole purpose of understanding that you have it out there is to prepare exactly what that looks like. I'll be the first one to tell you I'm not the expert, but yeah, I think we need to figure out how to start planning for stuff, and if it includes set-asides every year, then maybe that's what we do.
I remember back in the day, and it's been a long time, but I know the town of Greenwich used to have a capital project, a non-recurring fund where they did that. They didn't do bonding for a very long time. They would set aside money annually, and they would pay for large projects from that money. I know there's some potential issues with that in terms of, putting money aside, especially in an inflationary period, investing it, et cetera, because we have limitations. But, maybe we just, I think we're going to have to talk about that at some point. So.
Agreed. Can I just to be clear, so I'm understanding, Lori, what were the items you wanted to move around?
So the East Trunk Wetland Replacement Project, the $6.25 million, which is listed under fiscal 23.
Okay.
If that does get approved and it comes up for approval, it's going to be, assuming it gets approved, it'll be in our fiscal 24 bonding. So I would move that if this is supposed to be on a cash flow basis to fiscal 24, and then that would have to push the East Trunk Line Replacement, the $10 million project, which is now starting in fiscal 24. That's moved out a year as well, because that one, as I understand, is phase 2 and starts after the first part is completed.
Right. I think we need to talk to Bill, obviously, because that project is the 23 slotting. It's something that does need to get done, and we have that money that we've been given, and I know there's restrictions about when you have to use it and such. So.
No, I agreed, Brenda, and I assume it will get done. I'm just talking about when we bond for it. So if we bond for that in July, then that becomes, from a debt service perspective, that becomes a fiscal 24 item.
Right, but my understanding is that item was the reason why Bill came to you guys before, is we want to get that done, and I'm assuming he's expecting to come, if that's the item that you didn't approve. That's the item he wants done. So I don't think waiting till July is probably an option on that one item.
No, for the bonding. Not for the approval, for the bonding. So if we approve it next month or this month, let's say, we would bond for that in July. And so from our debt service schedule,
Right.
it would be in our fiscal 24 bonding. That's all I'm saying.
So how would we actually get the money to start working on this stuff if we don't have it?
Once we get the approvals, we can start working on it.
Okay.
We don't need the bond issuance.
All right. I mean, if
Yeah,
you.
we usually use just the town. We usually just use town cash until we get to
Right,
bonding
if you
it,
think
right?
that will work, I
Right.
mean, crunch the numbers a bit, but it's something that we should take a look at and then come back for the next meeting. Sure, go ahead.
Just follow, I seem to remember in previous conversations when the developers are doing a project that they're, from when the WPCA people were here, and feel free to correct me or refresh my memory, that there's a portion of their project that goes into the WCA fund, right? To help offset that. And I don't remember exactly what percentage or what amount that is, but I wasn't sure when was the last time we looked at those amounts or those
So
percentages?
WPCA sets that schedule, not us, not the town.
Is it market right? Is it?
It's
when's
based on
the-
usage, I believe.
Okay, just,
Like
I'm
we
just
were talking
thinking.
about
yeah.
Sacred Heart, they WPCA decided to charge them $1 million for the work on a pump station that wasn't just for Sacred Heart, it was for that whole area. But because they were putting the dorm up, so they kicked in.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I'm just raising the point to the point of putting money aside and how we help to,
Yeah.
raise some
And the
revenue.
Center has paid.
What is our
quite a bit
expectations?
for it.
Yeah, what are our expectations on rather than a case-by-case basis, do we have some
I
sort
actually
of
think that the
standard
process-
expectation?
Right, the process they have in place is a little funky, in my opinion, and I've talked to Jim Went about it, because in some instances, like, people who hook up earlier, like if a project happened 3 years ago, a development, for example, they only pay a certain amount, and the guy at the end of the trunk line pays a big fee. It's kind of unfair,
So
the
you're
way
saying-
they have it
Yeah,
set up now.
so I'm just raising that as an idea to think
I thought
about
they should
how we
have
do
it
that.
where everybody pays whatever, the last guy on the line shouldn't get whacked with the biggest cost.
Understood.
Yeah.
That's why I'm raising it, just.
Right. But they do have a system in place for that.
And Jennifer, just so you're aware, the question you're raising, that's exactly what the Board of Finance asked for in the WPCA plan for the end of January. So what we talked about in our last meeting when this other project came up was, as we start to pay for some of these projects out of fund balance, how does that fund balance get replenished? So they've got, they estimate what's going to go in there from these additional fees, what's going to go into fund balance through their additional fees, and they've projected that out. And I think what they told us is that based on their current projection, their fund balance would run out in, and Jim may remember this, I don't know if it was 2026 or 2027. So what that tells them is that they have to start actively planning for that and looking at their fee strategy, their rate structures, and all that, so that they're planning ahead and they're making sure that they're always going to have a fund balance of a certain amount to be able to handle, capital and maintenance projects. So we're waiting to see that short story.
Thank you.
So,
I think Mark's got a question.
I don't see his hand up.
He put something in the chat.
Oh, he did?
Mark, did you have a question?
I have a question not related to WPCA, so I was going to wait if we're not done speaking on that.
No, go ahead.
I've just had a minute to go through FY25 and just quickly move Sergeant Murphy Playground to 24, but you still have the $4 million in there for the Penfield construction that was moved to 24. So is that overinflated, overstated for a year overstated by $4 million? Capital over $1 million. Still in there, if that's what was moved to 2024.
Yeah, I'll have to take a look at that. You might be right.
I don't
Yeah,
see
that
it
can
anywhere
probably,
else. See, we took out town hall renovation, Turner property, and the fire station.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to point that out. It looks like that there's another $4 million hanging around, maybe.
Well, it's all reimbursed, so it doesn't really affect, it doesn't affect this plan because the net amount was zero. But that's a good catch.
So I was hoping that for this meeting, we could at least sort of focus on the 24 list and non-reoccurring in capital. I know some members have to leave at 6. I actually have something else I have to attend. It's after 6. So I was hoping we could focus on the 24 non-reoccurring, sort of any flush out questions, anything that maybe, and then I was hoping the remaining meetings before the workshop at the end of the month, we would be able to at least have, a fairly good consensus among the group about that 5-year capital plan, you know, acknowledging the fact that it is a draft and there will be movement, it's a living document. But I'm just interested in the group's thoughts on the 24 non-reoccurring and capital.
I have a question.
Yes,
Mark.
yes.
The first item, Tungus Hill Shed, that's the property over across from the liquor store on Tungus Hill Road there, is that?
No, that's
What is that?
that's different. The shed is a salt shed, you know, when you go to Tungus Hill.
Yeah, I mean, I got it,
Yep.
sorry, yep, sorry.
I know,
Thank you.
I almost thought it, like, when we first brought it out, it was the same thing too.
Yeah, okay, I got it, I know what it is now.
Thankfully, we haven't had to use any salt.
You cursed us now.
You're all gonna be cursing at me if something happens. So nice when it doesn't snow, it saves the town money.
So Jim, because you weren't here when we went through it, I'll go through these real quick, the additions in 24.
The additions in 24. And what exhibit are you talking about?
So this is an Exhibit 2.
Two,
This
okay.
one, big one, yeah.
Yep.
So in Exhibit 2, 24 at the toward the bottom of page 1.
One sec. Let me just get to that. It's not exhibit 1, okay, 4. I don't know why I don't have that. I got it. Exhibit 2, yep.
All right. So we added the lower wharf fishing pier, about halfway down in 24 for non-recurring.
And we were talking about that earlier. I don't know if you were here for that conversation.
Okay.
It's at the bottom of the sheet, or which one are you, does he have the right one? Is he looking at this one?
You're talking about right down here, right?
Yes.
Okay.
We,
Walsh get color-coded ones. What's
He has a
going
color
on?
printer.
Like Walsh got color-coded.
special.
He's special.
Go to the Board of Ed. They've got about 100 color
I
printers.
know, we don't have that nice stuff here, but, we're the black and white, okay.
We added at the very bottom Sergeant Murphy Playground replacement. We added the one on the next page, Tungus Hill Park pickleball. So the original request there, the original proposal was just for the replacement of the 4 courts that are there. We're saying proposing to add 2 new courts.
And then the dog park, and this was based on, we talked about this earlier, you know, moving that sub-list, Jim, out, you know, where things that we really don't have firmed up and aren't shovel-ready, because we were going over the bonding cap. When we moved those things out, we had a lot of room, and we were like, well, why don't we move some of this stuff up, right? Playground, it's a big benefit to the neighborhood, not for a lot of money. And then also just taking into account, Anthony obviously had shared the master plan, the recreation plan he's sharing tonight in a public meeting. And just being in this, you know, this town, for a select person's office, the phones ring off the hook, and we get a lot of emails about dog parks. People have wanted, you have no idea.
Don't we have a dog park?
No.
It's called Mohegan's. It's
No, that's
it's
an
Lake
open-
Mohegan. It's
No,
like the
that's a
biggest dog park in the world.
It's a conservation area that dogs are allowed to run in.
I know. What's wrong with it?
People really want a fenced-in dog park, and it came up big in the master plan. So there were 2 locations in town that were identified in the master, the consultant identified with all the surveys from residents and, you know, people, a lot of people responded. So we thought, let's just throw a placeholder in there. Obviously, putting any dog park in is, you know, somewhat controversial to that neighborhood, so who knows where they'll go. But I at least wanted to have it on there because it is a big, interest of our community. And then also, the pickleball. If you look at the survey results from that Park and Rec, and they're doing that presentation tonight, pickleball is wildly popular in this town. And we cannot, literally, those pickleball courts are full all the time. And I can't tell you how many emails I get from people about pickleball. It's incredible. People love it. It's a recreational activity. Anyway, it's not that expensive to add 2 additional courts to Tungus Hill. And I think it's a nice thing to do for people. I mean, let's say the majority of them are seniors who enjoy this sport. And considering our senior center is not that great, I feel like giving more pickleball courts based on just the feedback that we get through email, through this town survey, obviously the town's master plan, and phone calls.
So
There's a big need for it.
So you're talking about non-recurring in a given year being $7.8 million? I mean, we've never really we've done like 6. It's normally been 3 for the Board of Ed.
Well, you're looking at the one without the net. It's 5.
Yeah.
It's 5.4.
Okay,
That's minus the reimbursements.
okay,
So the cost, then
we-
the reimbursement, and then the net.
okay. The amount of stuff we're doing for Parks and Rec, you have to admit, is
Well,
off
it's
the,
not-
is off the charts.
Well, it's not
Because
parking.
we're
It's
using a
not-
lot of money for ARPA to do that. We just did, how many, 5 parks did we do?
It's not for park and rec, it's for recreational activities in our community,
Okay,
which happen to fall under their department.
okay. Are we going to move anything backwards out of Parks and Rec that they plan to do that year, to do pickleball, to do any of this other stuff? I mean, or we're just adding?
Well, I said we had, in our internal meetings, took out the things that we knew weren't shovel-ready. And so we're just.
And Jim, you took away their tennis lights,
What? I did take, well.
The turf
those,
field.
Those tennis lights are not for us, they're for a private club, aren't they?
I'm kidding.
I thought they were for a private club. I mean, maybe we should go up to Brooklawn and pay for some of their lights, too.
We did take out the turf field,
Turf field.
too.
We took out the turf field.
Oh, the turf field's gone.
That got
Okay.
moved. So this is just based on the survey. I don't know if you're signing on to that meeting tonight. They're doing for, which I think is very educational. If you look at that recreation master plan, that a large percentage of our residents participated in. It's very eye-opening about what's important to our community.
Can I circle back to Exhibit 3 really quickly?
Sure.
These are the things that were taken off and from a previous iteration. And since we've got at least 6 years built out here, I do feel like these guys don't have a home, so to speak now, and I understand you want to get more information on them. So I would just express that,
Doesn't have a home.
well, like they don't have a year.
Oh.
You know what I'm saying? You don't have, like they were on, they're not on, and they don't have like a new home, so to speak, in terms of a year, and not for right now or anything, but I think some of these are important and valuable as well. So just as
Oh, they totally are. They're just
Right.
not flushed out enough.
Yeah.
Giant Steps is not flushed out.
No, I hear you. I'm just going to,
Turner, we don't even have, the property doesn't even belong to us yet. We have made incredible progress, and we are close to.
I'm just going to say, don't forget about this 54 million, that, that
No,
as
without a
part of
doubt.
the bigger picture.
Yeah, and again, I think these are things, again, they're not fully flushed out, and the 5-year is
Totally.
is a living document. There may be, once we get more information on those items, and if there's a strong sense of support for them, and it turns out we might pull something out of another time and slot something in. I mean, who knows?
Thank you.
I don't want to say this, but Old Town Hall could get blown away or something, and then we'd be like, uh-oh, we've got to do something. So, just saying.
Where's the Board of Ed's non-recurring? Is that not on this same document? It says town. Excuse me?
So you can see the amount in the summary page in Exhibit 1.
Okay.
So if you look at the top of Exhibit 1,
For 24?
You see at the
all
top?
the way across, it's got from 23 to 28.
Yeah. So we'll be talking about the fiscal year '24 when we talk about the budget. So we'll be talking about non-recurring projects for $2,074,000.
Yeah, the net will be 1.6. after their reimbursement.
Okay, so when we're looking at the non-recurring budget, if we were to approve all of that, that would be, I just want to look at it as a whole. We'd be looking at 1.6 for the Board of Ed. And on the town, it's 5.4. So once again, we're going to $7 million, when historically we've been around 6. It's normally been 3 and 3. So we're increasing non-recurring bonding by $1 million.
It was always 6 million every year?
It's sometimes been less. I mean, we could get the history.
It was never 7?
Not that I know of, no. Yeah, I know. It started off, I'm just trying to see the growth. If, Jared, you can get us the history of the non-recurring, both town side and Board of Ed side, and totals for the last 10 years to see the growth of that. I mean, it's just another form of bonding, but, you know, this thing
Right.
started off, I mean, I was on the RTM when this first started. It was like, literally like 1.5 and 1.5, and it was supposed to kind of like stay that, but now it's like becoming its own bonding source, like.
I mean, I'm not sure how that develops. I do feel like there hasn't been a whole lot of investment in the town in many, many, many years. I think I said that when I came in. I felt like, you know, and I was part of it. When you and I were on the RTM, we both approved over $260 million in school construction in a 2-year period. We paid for knocking down McKinley and put a new McKinley up. We built a new Burr Street. We built a new middle school. We reopened a second high school. We renovated Tomlinson. We were part of, like, you know, a group of people that's invested a significant amount of money because the schools had been, you know, neglected for many, many years. And I think what happened was I was involved. I was on the Board of Ed for 6 years. And there was a neglect of the town to make up for what the schools had been neglected. So there are things that we're trying to do catch-up work on. Now, I don't know what number it's supposed to be. You know, if our finance people say, oh, that's a terrible number, and you're blowing past your cap, but I think this is based on what we got from Matt Spurndle saying, you know, you should try to stay in these numbers. This is something we feel comfortable with. I mean, obviously, this is up for, you know, this group doesn't vote. You know, we're kind of like, we agree, we think these are good, we think these are good items. All of these items have to come before the town bodies, be presented, have discussion, and then ultimately voted through 3 town bodies. But these are items that, the bottom line is I don't know what the magic number is for non-reoccurring. That question's ever really been brought up to me.
I mean, to give you some example, I mean, if you just look at this form, non-recurring capital for last year, the current year that we're in,
Yeah,
the town side was $2.5 million, almost 2.6.
right.
And the Board of Ed side was 1.261. So already right there, what I'm trying to, I guess, get to is that it's like 4.7 total.
I mean, listen, I think we're
Yeah.
staying within our cap.
Yeah, I would just like to see what the history is.
Could pay our projects now, or we can wait till later. I mean, you know, there's some items that I think we've paid dearly because we didn't take care of over the years.
I would just like to see it because the non-recurring started off as being, okay, we're going to assign some amount of money, but not all of it. The rest of it would have to be in people's budgets.
Right. What is the difference, though? It's always over a certain amount.
Yeah, the non-recurring is things that are under $1 million. And it's got a couple other
Right.
technicalities, criteria.
When was it established? Do you remember?
2003 to 5, I think.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Okay.
So, yeah, if we could,
What is your concern, that we're just doing a bunch of small projects and using up our bonding capacity on these small projects and not
yeah, yes, I mean,
ourselves enough to address the larger items?
I mean, I would just like to see what we've been doing. I mean, in the end, I guess it doesn't matter whether it's
Right.
the smaller projects or the larger projects. It's how much can we borrow, I guess. So you're just cutting yourself off on the larger projects the more you're spending them on smaller projects. The other question is whether should some of these just be bonded or not bonded, budgeted for, capital projects. Like, for example, there's always capital projects in the Board of Ed budget. We could take every single one out. It's just going to eat into our bonding capacity.
Well, we have things in the operating budget, but obviously, I thought if I remember now, the rationale was always, do we want to, if it's got a lifespan of over 10 years, we should put it in a bonding. If it has a lifespan under 10 years,
Yeah.
we should put it in operating. That's what I remember. And how much you bond it, right? If it's 10, it's like a lower bond. If it's a longer lifespan, you get a longer bond. That's always been the way I remember it back.
Yeah, now, and I understand that whenever we started doing that in the early 2000s or something, there's been an inflationary amount. So whether the under 1 million should be increased to some other number, that's a good question, because that was a number we had established way back when. It's been 20 years or so, or getting close to 20 years, and we're still using that number. I don't know. I mean, I would just like to see the history of it.
So how do
Yep, we can get that.
Does anybody have any feedback on the actual items on the list? You love them, you hate them, you think some things should be moved, you think more items should be moved in? Do you think items should be swapped out?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about Jim's, I don't have any comment on the specific items, honestly. I'm just thinking about Jim's comment about the amount we're allocating on this stuff. It seems to me, and Jim, if you were going to change the upper limit of this, that 1 million, I might also, I think you might want to look at the lower limit, right? So you have things in here for $110,000, and I think that's typically what we've done, right? If it's under 100,000, it goes in the operating budget. So,
Yes.
Maybe that's going forward, that might be another,
Okay.
if it starts, eating up too much of the bonding capacity, that might be, the other way to look at it, is to not have, smaller items like that in here.
Yeah, like the shift commander vehicle replacement, I think I've technically seen that as part of their regular budget in the past for the fire department. Not part of non-recurring.
Oh, in 25? Are you looking at a 25?
At fiscal year 24, there's a shift commander vehicle replacement, that 110,000, because there's been years where we've cut that for a given year out of their capital budget. Meaning, I don't think that just because something meets under $1 million, it automatically now gets yanked out of the budget. Every single item that's under $1 million, up from 100 to $1 million, gets yanked out of the budget. That was never the way it was really thought about.
Well, like we've been doing like the cop cars, right? But that's a whole bunch, right? It's always like 10 cop cars and.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to see the cop cars be done one car at a
No,
time or
exactly.
something like
Well,
that.
We buy them in a grouping, right?
Yeah,
We buy
yeah.
10, but we still put those in the budget, but obviously it's been supplanted by that overtime fund, which has been very helpful,
Yeah.
obviously. But I don't know.
And I'm just raising this because the Board of Finance is people who've been on there for a while are going to be looking at this, and this is going to explode
Ever did
for 2 hours. It's going to become a 2-hour argument.
Did you ever do a fire truck, like a replacement vehicle for the fire? Because the chief came to us like this, and I don't know, is this past practice? You never did one?
I'd have to look. I'd have to look about the fire trucks and how we've done them before, but.
Right. And I don't mean like the big fire trucks. Obviously, that's a huge item.
We might have paid for him with cash out of his capital budget, but I'd have to look at how we've done that for the last couple.
Yeah,
We'd have to
'cause I
take a look
don't-
at it.
I don't think we did any since I've been here.
Yep. Matter of fact, I think it was specifically, I don't know, we'd have to look at it.
3 years ago? In what, though? Operating or non-reoccurring? You thought it was? Yeah, I mean, we
at
could
it.
take a look. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I'll bring it
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
Sure.
Because
Yeah, it may have been a few years ago if that vehicle was cheaper, it just didn't meet the
Because
threshold, you know?
I don't
Now it
know.
gets above 100,000, and so it's,
No,
Yeah.
I remember that shift commander vehicle came up. I remember you guys discussing it because there was a whole discussion on whether they could repurpose the existing equipment from the old one into the new at Ford truck. Remember?
Yep.
And so there was a lot of dialogue on that. So I don't recall whether that was non-recurring or not, but
Okay.
there was quite a bit of discussion on it.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. That's good. That's good input. Thank you. What else you got?
And the reason I bring this, I just will say that I think we used to give, like, when it first started, we used to give the town and specifically the Board of Ed a specific number, and they would try to come in around that number so that that stuff would not be in their budget.
Yeah,
It was never supposed to be every project, like, I'm not picking on you guys because it's on the town side too, but it wasn't supposed to be every project that the Board of Ed has that was under $1 million would come out and the town would pay them with a bond on the side. It was supposed to be, you guys have your budget, it should go up at some reasonable amount.
Yeah, well, a lot of that was the differentiation between maintenance and,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah.
So,
But it shouldn't be every single
Capital.
project that's
But
over
I do-
between $100 and $1 million that you guys want to do.
yeah, I recall,
Get the town to like absorb that.
yeah, prior to
That
Angelus.
raises our budget because the debt
Yeah.
service is on our side.
I mean, I remember prior to Angelus, when Tom Cullen was here, he always used to tell us that there was like this, he used to call it not an imaginary number, but a general number that he
Yeah.
wanted to stay below.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a firm number, but he always tried to stay, I believe it was below like 1.5 million, no
Or
more
$2
than $2
million.
million.
Yeah, it was always
It
something
grew
like
a little bit since I've been on the board.
So
but-
you'd pick specific things and pull them out of your capital budget.
Yes.
And be able to spend them on those items that the town would pick up on an individual bond that we were going for non-recurring.
Yes, and then there were certain things that he would try and
Yeah.
see if he could get into the operating.
Yeah. Yep. All right. It's just, I think we're gonna have to look at that, and I think we're gonna have to look at what we've done with like these police pumpers and the police vehicles themselves.
Where?
Well, because you have a pumper on here for 980,000
Well, pumper's
is I mean fire. That's what I'm talking
Yep.
about. I'm saying on the town side, because I don't have the Board of Ed side of what they're going to use their
pumper's
money
expensive.
for. Do you have a list of what that money consists of?
For this.
For
year?
the 24, when you guys are saying that you,
Yeah.
I assume it's because it's 2 million.
You guys got
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
okay.
it's that book.
Yeah, I think we got it the last time we were here. I just didn't bring it.
Remember the vestibules conversation?
Yes, yes.
That we didn't want to go too much into. It was 4 vestibule projects, or 3 vestibule projects, a boiler replacement project, and at Ward there's a tennis court and basketball court. So those.
Yeah, I do remember, because we
Okay.
couldn't get into detail about the vestibules.
can't, yeah.
So, yeah, so I remember the conversation. Thank you for reminding me.
Sure.
Thank you.
So let me just ask you a question. I want to make sure I understand exactly where you're coming from. Why, rules and regulations aside, like why wouldn't you want to bond the commander vehicle and even though it's only 110 grand, 100, why wouldn't you want to do that?
Because I guess, do you want to budget capital items, or do you not want to budget capital items? If you want to take every piece of capital item that's in the budget out, and just not any type of capital and take it out, well, the budget changes then. The budget changes.
Right.
It's just our debt service is going to start going up.
So, and again, I'm not the finance expert here, because to me, I would look at it that, the town is going to pay one way or the other, right? So it's either going to come out of your operating
Well,
budget.
is it though? Or are you just not going to, are you going to push off a project for a year or
Well,
two?
But my point
Priority.
would be, and this is something that the rule of thumb that I've always understood, like if you can finance at cheap money, then you finance as much as you can at cheap money. Now, I understand that
Not cheap
environment
money
is
anymore.
changing a bit, right. That environment is changing a bit. But wouldn't you look to do that, though?
up to a point. I mean, up to you hit your budget, what you should as a AAA be bonding.
Yeah.
I guess. But, I mean, there's normally been things in the budget that we require to be paid for with cash that we budget for.
Right. But wouldn't,
That we pay as an ongoing basis. And then you get into a whole point. I mean, you can get into whether police cars should be, we pay for them on a yearly basis now, but there was a point in time where some people thought it was a good thing to bond. And then every 3 years, we'd bond them, pay them over 3 years.
Yeah.
And then the 3 years, we'd buy them again, whatever. And so the only difference was we were buying them. The only difference with that was we were just paying interest for no reason. I mean, wow, if you're burning through police cars like that, a
Well,
certain number every year.
and that's a valid point. So if you have an operating budget where you can accommodate these costs, excuse me, then yeah, that it seems to make sense. But if you don't, what other options would you have? It would either, to me, it's either you're going to do the project and bond it, or you're not going to do the project at all.
Or you're going to put it in your operating budget.
But that's my point. If there's not funds in the operating budget to accommodate everything.
Okay.
So it raises.
I just,
Right.
for example,
Something has to be paid for out of an operating budget, or it gets to be bonded,
I'm
Really have
looking
to
at,
look.
I'm looking at the FY17 budget book. And just as an example, for fire in their capital outlay, never went over 128,000 for 4 years. So from FY13 to FY17, a 5-year period, they were never over 128,000. It was 29,000 one year, 71,000, 38,000, 91,000, 53,000. So there weren't any larger capital items that they were funding either. But I just, kind of randomly pulled that up, but that's an example. Police is the same thing, obviously, with the exception of the police cars. Those are paid out of their capital outlay, but everything else in the police budget is also very small. There's no large capital items or non-recurring capital items in there. They had something for $11,000, something for $4,500.
And some 20,000.
And then the police, and then the vehicles.
All right.
I don't know. It just, when I look at it like as my personal budget for my own self,
Yeah.
I could put everything on the credit card. I could put it. I could put toothpaste. I could do all that stuff. But eventually, I got to pay it back. Number one,
Yeah.
and maybe I'll build up a lot of cash because I haven't spent stuff. But to some degree, you have to figure out what you want to bond and what you want to pay for.
Right.
And at some point, your bonding's going to go up so much, you're just going to be paying interest on all this stuff.
Yeah, no, I understand.
You know.
And the perspective that I come from too, is a little bit different. It's the commercial environment where basically, any money that, all the money that you're spending as part of your operating budget, in essence, you're reinvesting into your business. That you are theoretically gaining some sort of a return from that. I understand in this world it's a little bit different, but the point for me would be is if you could finance these projects at lower interest rates where you didn't have to spend your operating budget, to me it would make sense to do so. Again, provided it's within the caps that make perfect sense, and if Jared feels that we're within those limits, to me I think that's the way you would do it.
Well, I think for a number of years, we did have very low interest rates.
Yeah.
And I think the town's position has been, you don't want to whack people in a tax increase if it's something that's going to last a long time. And that's what I typically have seen over, and, I started my career on the RTM in 1999. So, listen, these are discussions we could have for another day, I think, but I would like us to, if not tonight, if people could take a look at the list more closely for our next meeting. And then I think it would be helpful to just take a really good look at that 5-year. What do you, like Lori mentioned a few changes and slotting changes, if there's anything like that, again, the 5-year is a living document. it's not set in stone. It's not like every year that's what we're going to do, and nobody can have any input or discussion on changing it. But just to have it, as we had mentioned in the beginning, Jared had heard from other CFOs in other towns, and our finance specialist who assists the town said we should have one on file. And I think that it's a good exercise, just, I don't know, for us as elected officials and anyone who wants to click on and watch these things, to have an understanding about what the town's needs are and things of that nature. So if people could focus a little bit more closely on that 24 non-reoccurring in capital for our next meeting, because I'd like some consensus. Again, we don't vote here.
Yeah.
We're just saying, yeah, it looks like a decent list, makes sense. And then we can start to dig into the 5-year, hopefully, and be able to finish that at our next meeting. And then have that be shared with, during the Board of Finance capital meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
Could we get the historical analysis within the next, by like Monday or something like that? Or Jared?
Yeah.
On like a 10 years on just on non-recurring?
Yeah, how much we borrowed?
Just, and the only thing I'm really looking forward is how much for the town was spent, how much was the Board of Ed was spent, and then the total.
Yep.
The only, go ahead, Jennifer.
I have a question, just for, and this is probably for Lori and Jim, more for the capital planning workshop. So we've got these documents that have, town, Board of Ed, WPCA. And is that the most helpful way for you to look at this by fiscal year, all three separate? Or at some point, are you going to want to by year all combined under one document? I don't know if it's easier for these to be separate for you as they are now versus combined.
Well,
And I'm saying fiscal year '24, all the town stuff, all the BOE stuff, WPCA. Yes, the list of the projects. Because right now, we're working in separate documents. Like you have our,
Sure.
of our
The
stuff.
Board of Ed willing to do all that work for us?
I'm just asking, I just don't know.
say yes.
I'm just asking,
I would love to see
we have the summary, right? Like, he's got the summary, but the summary, I don't know.
I like to see it combined. I think it's hard when they're, and there's a pretty good job.
Isn't it just a cut paste?
Kind of the different pages and different formats. I
Why
mean,
is it
I
a
think
cut
if was
pa-
all
why isn't it
combined, you
not
could
a
have
cut paste?
subtotals If you want, under the Board of Ed, but yeah.
No, but just the
like we
projects.
Present the WPCA as a separate entity, but I like seeing it combined by year, because then it just, that's, the whole premise behind this is feeding into our, our capacity and our debt service numbers, so
What
that's
I'm-
my personal opinion.
Right, what I'm going to say is that, let's get through our other meetings. It would take considerable amount of time for the finance department, we are actively working on the budget and doing a lot of things, to put it in some other different format than we have been utilizing this entire process. So I don't find it that hard to follow. We've been doing this for the last 7 months. You get to see the reimbursement, you get to see everything. We are under the caps on all this. So let's just see how we do, and if we're able to accommodate it, we will try. If we're not, then we're going to just have to work off what we've been using.
Yeah, just to be clear, I'm not suggesting a format change. All you're doing is just, moving the boxes so you have subtotals by, if you have everything by year. I think the rest of the format is fine.
Just from a visual perspective.
I guess it's going to add a ton of paperwork because you're going to want to see this, I think, by fiscal year, right? I think, to me, that's the most important thing, is that you see these by fiscal year. But now I think what you're asking is that you see them by, with all three entities in one.
Still by fiscal year, but just maybe you have, because right now you sort of have, what we always have is we have a page for the town, a page for the Board of Ed, a page for WPCA, just sort of having it all by fiscal year with maybe just subtotals. I don't think it's a big deal to change it, but I'll, leave it up to you guys.
Yeah, the subtotals are on the summary page.
Yeah. That's helpful.
I mean, all the information is there, it's just, it's talking about, I don't know how many hours of someone's time to have to reshuffle the deck with all information that's already located.
Yeah.
Listen, I have no trouble following it like this, I would prefer our people doing, work that needs to get done and reshuffling decks.
Yeah, I would just say, like, it would be great, but it's not worth, creating a mega project, because being familiar with trying to juggle multiple spreadsheets, I know how annoying that can be
How
sometimes.
frustrating it can be?
Yeah.
Well, if there's no further questions on the list, if everybody will take a look at that
Yep.
for our next meeting.
Yep, definitely.
especially Focusing on 24.
Yep.
Jared will get back to everyone. We'll get back with that analysis that Jim asked for. And then again, if you do have time, take a look at that, the 5-year,
Yeah,
all of it.
okay,
And
it's fair.
then we can see each other next week. All right.
All right.
Thank you. That was very helpful.
Yeah, no, it was good.
It was good. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good night.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks.